Today I want to show you some cards that I've made combining the fancy border thin cuts, which are these ones here. 5 different borders, and I've created cards using 4 of these and some blending with the Distress Oxide inks. And I've mainly used the Besties stamp sets to create some cards, so hang around till the end because I've got a whole variety of cards to show you and techniques that I've done using the fancy borders and these stamp sets and some colouring in. The one that I'm going to show you today is this little Lucy stamp, and the great thing about them is that you get the stamp set, but you can also order them with the thin cuts as well. So the balloon and the girl here are both cut out with the thin cut. You can purchase it on its own without the thin cuts, but I do like having them, and it's not too much of a difference in price point to add the thin cuts to them. So let's get started doing some colouring. I use the Tri-Blend Spectrum Noir markers, and for this one I'm going to fully colour her hair. I'm using the Ice Grey blend, and I'm just going around in circles. I'm not doing any shading or anything with this part of the colouring for her. And I'm hoping I don't get my head in the way too much while I'm doing this, but I am going to speed this up as I get along with this. But I wanted to show you how I've done her hair to show a little bit of differentiation. Normally I do all shading along all the curls and everything like that, but for this one I want to give her black hair, so I've coloured the base in the Ice Grey blend, the lightest one, and then I'm just going to come in with the black marker and just do little dots, so you can just see a little bit of the grey coming in, and it gives texture to the hair, because we know that when we look at hair it's not all one flat colour. And it does cover up with the black some of the definition of the stamped image, and the heart in her hair disappears altogether, but you could get a little gem dot and put a heart there. I know I have some in my stash from previous product, but just by doing this you still get the feel of the curls and a little bit of light coming through with the light grey underneath, and it's as quick as that. So now I'm going to go through and colour her dress. I'm going to use the Hydrangea blend, and this is where I'm going to speed things up a little bit for you so that you don't have to watch everything that I do. I am not an expert with colouring, but I do find it enjoyable and relaxing to do. When the piece is quite small that I'm colouring in, I usually just use 2 of the colours, so I'm quite often just use dark and light. You would have seen me do that on the belt and the little trim here on the dress, and I've also done that on the shoes. And if I find that it's not quite dark enough, I'll just go back in and add some more dark. But when it's such a tiny little thing that you're adding colour to, You really don't need to use all three colours of the markers. I quite often come back in with the dark again just to give a little bit more definition once things have been blended out a bit, and just do a little bit of a touch-up. Because with some of the colours you find that once you go over it with the light, it does bleed it out just a little bit too much. I'm going to use muted brown on the skin and start with the dark and do little circles around the hairline and down her cheeks, her ears. And I'm going to draw just a little fine line. I'm hardly touching the nib of this marker to the paper at all because I want a really fine line. And then I'm going to come in with the medium and go over the top. And a little bit more in. I'm not going to worry with the legs because they are quite fine. So I'll leave those with the medium blend and just go straight into putting the light colour on. And you can see that it just gives just enough definition between, say, where the sun would be or the light would be hitting. And you can blend those in as much as you like by going over with the light. So she's basically done, but I do want to add little pink cheeks, but I'm going to leave that for a little bit. Now I'm going to colour the balloons, and I'm going to do like a rainbow order. So with all the balloons, I'll start with the dark around the outside sort of edges and then go into the light. So I'll speed this bit up so that you can watch this if you'd like to see me colour them in. And then with the light, I'm using coral shades for this one because it's going to match in with the Distress Oxides. Then I'm going to go in with the lightest of the gold yellow blend. And then back in again with the dark. I find the gold yellow blend gives a good depth to the citrus colour. It gives a good yellow definition. The dark, mid and light of the citrus blend doesn't have as much definition between all the shades that are contained within that barrel. So don't be afraid to experiment and try different markers together. So for that one I used gold yellow blend and citrus blend to get the yellow balloon. So that's all the balloons done. So now I'm just going to give her some little pink cheeks. I'm going to use the mid of the pale pink blend. It's hard to say. And then I'm going to come back in with the lightest of the muted brown and just blend over that just a little bit once more so that they don't stand out too much. But you still get the look of having the rosy pink cheeks. So that's all the colouring done for the card. Now we're going to work on the background. So I'll just pop these aside. So you can see here I've cut a card panel which is 5.5 by 4.25, and then I've used the fancy borders, and I've just used this one here, the gentle swell, to create a pattern going across. Now with the card panel I cut it and I just put the thin cut directly next to the next cut. So I would start with the bottom one, and then I would turn that over and I would number it. And I don't know if I've got all these in the right order, so we'll just see. 2, 3, 5. There we go. So they're all in the right order now so that I don't get confused. So as I put this through my die cutting machine, I turn them over and number the next one, and then I run the next one through and number it, and so on and so forth. So basically you're just working up a card panel like this. You can alter where the swell goes with all of these and create your own pattern so that they're not all uniform. But it is handy, especially if you get distracted and have to put them aside, just to put the numbers of them on the back of the piece. And what I'm going to do is blend these in rainbow order. Now, so I don't get dirty hands, I actually get a post-it note or all over my fingertips, because that can contaminate it. And I can hold my piece with this. So I'm just going to tap off, and if I go fairly lightly, not as much of the ink comes on. So depending on how vivid you want the Distress Oxide ink to be will depend on how much pressure you put on your blending tool and how much ink you load it up with. But because I want these to be all different colours of the rainbow, I want a fairly bright card. You could cut the card panels a bit longer so you've got more purchase to hold things when you're doing your blending. You can see I'm putting more ink on the lower section. So more pressure is going on this lower section, and then I ease off a bit as I'm blending up towards the top where the stitching is. So you can smooth it out a bit more. Distress Oxides are very forgiving, so if you see any areas that have too much of a line, you can keep working it. You can add more ink to it to blend them out a bit more. I like that looking like this. I'm going to treat this a bit more later. And to clean up, I just use a baby wipe, and then I get my paper towel and just dry it off. So I'm going in order of the rainbow, so I'll just pick up number 2 piece, and I'll do exactly the same thing that I just did with the candied apple. I'm going in with the spiced marmalade. If you wanted to, you could just put colour on the bottom and have a little bit of white at the top and make it very light. So it's really, you're in control of how much ink you can apply to this. These are all fairly vibrant, so I feel like I just want to add a little bit more colour to the candied apple piece. Mostly I go in circular motions, but then every now and then it's fine just to drag it along, just to blend things in quite smoothly, especially when you're working with a small rectangular piece like this. Okay, so that is the Distress Oxide ink part of it. I'm going to wipe off my mat and start assembling the card. So I've got a card panel here that will fit perfectly onto the card base, but I may decide that I want to put some black behind this. So for now, I'm going to adhere all of my rainbow pieces across the card panel. And because when I cut it with the thin cut, I'll be able to slot them all in just like a jigsaw puzzle. So I'm just going to visualize this and hold that up there and see if I want to put some black behind it. Sometimes putting black as the card base makes everything pop. But I think what I'll do for this one is just adhere this down and trim off the top of my panel. So I'm just going to trim this piece off because no one's going to realise there's not even an 1/8 of an inch that doesn't quite fit. So now I'm going to work out how to put all of this on. I want my balloons to sort of be in rainbow order as well. So she can go off to the side, some can go up. And I want them all to come in, so when I put her on like this, it looks like she's holding all of the balloons. So now all I have to do is take out the ones underneath and adhere those to the card panel. I'm going to use some of our thin 3D foam tape to pop this balloon up a little bit. And then adhere the tail of the balloon. By staggering the 3D foam tape, it just gives a little bit more dimension. And if some of the strings go behind her a little bit, that's okay. But for this one, I'm going to aim for them all to come in around here. Tuck that one in just a little bit. And then this green one can have some 3D foam tape as well. I'm actually going to double this. I could get out the regular 3D foam tape, but I've just got this out at the moment. So I'm just making that one a bit higher. And by tucking these all around, it looks like it's going to look like she's holding all of the strands. Okay, so now I just need to put some 3D foam tape on her. So this is what I mean by thin 3D foam tape and 3D foam tape. This is a thin one, and by thin we mean the height of it. There's two different widths in each packet. So you have a wider one and a thinner one there. So this is a thin 3D foam tape, and this one is the regular 3D foam tape, so it's a little bit thicker. So I just have to bear in mind when I'm adhering her that the top part of her head, because this is already raised here, only needs the thin 3D foam tape and the rest of her needs the thick. So I will put that on her now. And so that her hand looks like it's holding the strings here, I'm just going to put a little line through her hand so it gives some continuity to where the balloons are. And then all that's left to do is attach a sentiment. But what I want to do is add just some little flicks of water to this so that the Distress Oxide inks react to it. So I'm just going to get my water pen and squeeze a little bit of water out onto my all-purpose mat here, and I'll just cover off this section here so that I can tap. And the water will react with the Distress Oxide inks and give it a bit more texture. By squeezing some water out onto my all-purpose mat, it just gives me a little bit more to pick up with the brush. Sometimes tapping it with a pen makes more water fall off. And I've got my brush fairly close because I don't want it to go over my image. So I'm being quite careful and quite purposeful about where these splatters are going. So for the sentiment on this card, I'm going to use this month's Stamp of the Month, Winged Masterpiece. And wishing you the happiest of birthdays. There it is, all ready to go. You can see that I've got the Distress Oxide inks have reacted to the water splashes, and it just gives it a bit more texture to it. And I've put a sentiment that has been matted onto black cardstock onto here. So I did say that I was going to show you some more designs using the other girls. This one is another one of Lucy. So basically it is exactly the same thing that I've done here. Instead, I've run the swell going up the page rather than across the page. So you can do it whichever way you like. This one is Kelsey, and I've used the little flower pot and the watering can and coloured those in. I've used the swell, which looks a bit like a hill, so that's got more of a graduation there than this one here. And I've used the clouds as well. And with the clouds, I've only sponged the ink up to a certain point, and I've left the tops of it as white. So I've sponged it so that it graduates up. I've been a bit more heavy-handed down the bottom of the sections here with peel paint, and then just blend them up. So there's a real graduation of colour with these ones. These two are done with the heart thin cut border. One, I've zigzagged it so it gives a little bit more fun and playfulness to the card, and the other one I've just done straight across. And with both of these, I've just blended the ink to a certain point until it fades out a bit and left the tops of them white. So they're all the standard size cards, but you can use these thin cuts and cut longer strips with them. So you can see here the strips go all the way across. So basically when you're running it through your thin cutting machine or your die cut machine, you can line them up so that you can go end to end with them. And if it doesn't quite line up perfectly and you get a little bit of a jagged thing there, you can just cover it with your images or with sequins or things like that. So this one here, I actually really love all the colours, and you can see what I mean about giving a lighter touch when you're blending your inks. This one's very rich in colour. This is more a pastel type look because I haven't been as heavy-handed with the blending tool. Here's one with a heart border that I have done, and I've left this one blank of a sentiment because sometimes I just like to have cards ready to send to people and I can quickly stamp a thank you or a birthday or a wishing you well or a just because, whatever you want to do. And this one I've created a scene and I've added some extra things in. So this uses the Kelsey stamp and it uses the Olivia stamp with a little pet, and it also uses a new to March and April set that is the Daisy Meadows scrapbooking stamp set with thin cuts. You can get it just the stamp set or you can get it with the thin cuts as well. And I've used these flowers here and stamped them, and yes, it does have a thin cut, but I've fussy cut them apart so that I can spread them out across the card and make a bit of a scene. And you can definitely do these borders on a 12-inch scrapbooking page as well. You just have to line them up and have a 12-inch piece of paper that will fit through your thin cutting or die cutting machine and create a whole 12-inch border of them if you like. The other ones that I've done with the it's a retired stamp set, but I wanted to show you what I've done with them. It's with the winter penguins, and I've created a snow scene which is all the same. It's the same ink blended through, and I've tucked him in amongst there. I've done one here that's only got 3 of the pieces, so you don't have to go all the way up the page or up your card panel or whatever you like. You can just use several of the borders and not fill it all up and put a pattern paper behind it. I hope you've enjoyed looking at how I've created these cards using the Fancy Border thin cuts and different stamp sets, some from our March April catalogue and these ones from our January February catalogue. But it's a formula that will work with a lot of designs. So have fun with this, and I hope you've enjoyed watching what I've created. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.